I remember the day we made the decision. It was a very hot afternoon in Obuasi, the kind that pressed down on your shoulders and made you feel small in the vastness of the world. The three of us, Adakwa, Yo, and I, sat in the shade of a neem tree, staring at the horizon. Our future did not look bright, but it shimmered with promises that felt unreachable. We were young and we did not want to waste our youthful years working for peanuts, which was the order of the day in our country. "We can't keep living like this," Adakwa had said, his voice low, almost a whisper. His eyes were tired, the kind of tired that went beyond sleepless nights. It was the exhaustion of dreams deferred, of hope slowly withering away in the relentless heat of reality. Yo nodded, his usually cheerful face drawn into a tight frown. "I've been thinking about it too. Europe. People say it's not easy, but it has to be better than this." The idea had been floating in our minds for months, whispered in the corners of our rooms, discussed in hushed tones over bottles of beer. Europe, the land of opportunity, where a man could make something of himself. But the journey? The Sahara. The stories we'd heard, it was a gamble, a deadly one. But what choice did we have? I looked at my friends, the brothers life had given me, and said, if we're doing this, we do it together. No matter what. And so, it began. The first part of the journey felt surreal, almost like a dream. We left Ghana in the back of a batter truck. We were covered with tarpaulin, hiding from security. We got into another truck which was sending goods to the northern part of the country, the wind whipping our faces as we drove through towns and villages, the world blurring past us. There was a strange mix of excitement and fear in the air, like we were standing on the edge of something immense. When we crossed into Burkina Faso, the landscape started to change. The green fields and forests gave way to scrubland, and soon, we found ourselves in the vast, unforgiving expanse of the Sahara. The sun was merciless, the kind that could melt your brain and turn it into flame, a blazing eye in the sky that seemed determined to scorch the earth beneath it. The sun stretched out in all directions, an endless ocean of gold that swallowed everything in its path. We traveled with a group of about 30 others, all with the same dream, the dream of finding greener pastures somewhere in the west, like the Fulani tending their livestock to the south. The smugglers who led us were men hardened by the desert. They are called abochis in my country, but here they are the bosses here. Their faces etched with lines that told stories of countless journeys across the sands. They were cold, calculating, and always on edge, like they were waiting for something to go wrong. And soon, something did. It was the third night in the desert when we lost the first person. Her name was Amina, a young woman from Nigeria. She had been quiet, keeping to herself for most of the journey, but you could see the determination in her eyes. She wanted to get to Europe as badly as the rest of us. But the desert doesn't care about determination. That night, the wind picked up, howling like a wounded animal. The sandstorm came out of nowhere, engulfing us in a blinding wall of grit and fury. We huddled together, trying to shield ourselves from the storm, but the desert was relentless. When it finally passed, Amina was gone. We searched for her, shouting her name into the darkness, but the desert had claimed her. Just like that, she was gone. Adakwa and Yo were shaken, and I could see the fear in their eyes. But we pressed on. We had no choice. Days turned into weeks. The sun hammered down on us like an angry carpenter during the day, and the cold seeped into our bones at night. Water became scarce, and the little food we had was quickly running out. The desert was a cruel teacher, and every step felt like a lesson in survival. We started to lose people. Some succumbed to the heat, their bodies left behind in the sand. Others simply gave up, their spirits broken by the endless miles of nothingness. The group that had once been 30 strong dwindled to 15, then 10. Then, it was Yo's turn. He had been coughing for days, a dry, rasping sound that echoed in the silence of the desert. At first, we thought it was just the dust getting to him. But then the fever set in. His skin burned under my touch, and his eyes were glassy, unfocused. We need to stop, I told the smugglers, but they shook their heads. There was no stopping in the Sahara. To stop was to die. We did not come this far to stop and pamper anyone, let's keep moving, one of the smugglers shouted. Adakwe and I did our best to take care of Yo, but there was little we could do. The desert had taken hold of him, and it wasn't letting go. One night, as the stars glittered above us like cold, distant eyes, Yo whispered, "I'm sorry, Owusu. I'm sorry I couldn't make it." I held his hand, feeling the life slowly slipping away from him, and whispered back, "Don't be sorry, brother. We'll meet again, on the other side." The next morning, Yo was gone. Adakwe and I buried him in the sand, marking the spot with a bone of a dead animal. As we stood there, the wind blowing softly around us, I realized how close we had come to losing everything. But we couldn't turn back. We were almost there. Adakwe and I pressed on, driven by the memory of Yo and the others we had lost. The desert tested us at every turn, but somehow, we survived. We stumbled into Libya, our bodies battered and broken, but our spirits still clinging to the hope that had driven us from Obuesi. We stayed in Libya for some months, or let me say we were kidnapped by bandits. They stripped us naked, placed us in a room and took all our money. We had no money on us, so we had no other option than to work for money, for us to be able to continue our journey. In fact, life in Libya wasn't easy. We had a tough time there. The journey wasn't over, not by a long shot. There was still the Mediterranean to cross, still the dangers of smugglers, border patrols, and the ever-present threat of death. But we were almost there. Now, as I stand on the shore, staring out at the endless blue of the sea, I can't help but think of Adakwe, of Yo, of Amina, and all the others who didn't make it this far. Their faces are etched into my memory, ghosts that will forever haunt me. But their dreams live on in me. We were almost there, and now, I am here. The next chapter of my journey awaits. Standing on the shores of the Mediterranean, I could hear the waves crashing against the rocks, their rhythm relentless, as if the sea was breathing. The water stretched out before me like a great beast, dark and endless, hiding both salvation and doom in its depths. I could taste the salt in the air, feel the cold wind biting at my skin, and in that moment, all I could think about was Adakwe. He stood beside me, silent, his eyes fixed on the horizon. The smugglers had promised us a boat, a flimsy, overcrowded dinghy that would take us across the sea to Italy. It was our last obstacle, the final test before we could touch European soil. But the stories we'd heard echoed in my mind, of boats capsizing, of people drowning within sight of the shore, of coast guards turning people away. Yet here we were, with no choice but to risk everything. That night, under the cover of darkness, we boarded the boat. I could feel the tension in the air, a heavy, suffocating fear that clung to us like the damp sea mist. The boat rocked violently as we squeezed in, shoulder to shoulder, with more people than it was meant to hold. Mothers clutched their babies tightly, men whispered prayers under their breath, and the silence of the night was broken only by the sound of the waves and the occasional sob. Adakwe sat beside me, his hand gripping my arm. I could feel his fingers trembling, but his face remained expressionless. We didn't speak, there was nothing left to say. The journey had taken everything from us, and now we could only hope that it hadn't been in vain. Hours passed, and the night seemed endless. The boat pitched and rolled on the waves, and every time it felt like we were going to tip over, my heart stopped. I held onto the sides with a grip so tight my knuckles turned white. I could see Adakwe out of the corner of my eye, his gaze fixed on the dark water, his lips moving in silent prayer. The others were doing the same, everyone had their own way of coping with the terror that gnawed at us all. But as the sun began to rise, casting a pale light over the water, a strange sense of calm washed over me. Maybe it was exhaustion, or maybe it was the knowledge that we had come too far to turn back now. Whatever it was, I found myself staring at the horizon, waiting for the first glimpse of land. That's when it happened. A shout went up from the front of the boat. I turned to see what was happening, and my heart sank. The engine had sputtered, coughed, and then died. Panic spread through the boat like wildfire. People started screaming, calling out to Allah, God and Awuridi. They were shouting for help, pleading with the one we chose as captain to do something. But he knew nothing. He looked at us with a blank face. "We are going to die out here," someone cried. "No, We're not. I shouted back, though I wasn't sure if I believed it myself. The boat drifted aimlessly on the waves, the sun climbing higher in the sky, beating down on us. Hours passed, and the water supply ran low. People began to grow weak, their voices fading into whispers. The sea seemed to stretch on forever, an endless blue void that mocked our desperation. And then, Adakwe collapsed. I don't know how long he had been sick. Maybe it was the desert, the cold nights and scorching days, or the sea, the nauseating smell of it. Maybe it was the exhaustion of it all, the weight of the losses we had endured. But as I knelt beside him, trying to wake him, I knew deep down that Adakwa was slipping away from me. Adakwa, stay with me, brother, I begged, my voice cracking. His eyes fluttered open, and he looked at me, a faint smile playing on his lips. Owusu, he whispered, his voice barely audible. We made it, we almost made it. Don't talk like that, I choked out. We are going to get there. We are almost there. You just have to hold on a little longer. But I could see it in his eyes, he was already letting go. His hand went limp in mine, and with a final, shuddering breath, Adakwa was gone. I sat there, numb, the world around me fading into a blur. The sounds of the sea, the cries of the others on the boat, they all seemed distant, like they were coming from another world. All I could see was Adakwa's still face, the peace that had settled over him in death. We drifted for 2 more days. By the time the Coast Guard found us, we were barely alive, just shadows of the people we had once been. They pulled us onto their ship, one by one, and I watched as they covered Adakwa's body with a blanket. My mind was blank, my heart a hollow shell. I had nothing left to give. When we finally reached land, the others wept, fell to their knees, kissed the ground. But I stood there, staring out at the sea. We were almost there, I thought. Almost. Now, as I sit in this refugee camp in southern Italy, surrounded by faces that mirror my own, faces etched with pain, loss, and the faintest glimmer of hope, I can't help but think about the journey. About about Adakwa, about all the others who didn't make it. Their stories live on in me, their dreams a weight I carry every day. I don't know what the future holds. Europe is not the paradise we had imagined, it's cold, unforgiving, a place that doesn't easily welcome people like us. But I am here. I survived. And for Adakwa, for all of them, I will keep going. Because we were almost there. And now, I am.